When I was little, I wasn't that loud. I was not allowed in my grandmother's living room. There was plastic on all the couches. And there was a cut glass dish of candy, those little pastel mint patties, on the side table. And we could look, but we could not touch unless we were invited. One day, I was invited to go in and choose a candy. My brother was not invited. I took the one candy that I was allowed and I broke it in half and I gave half of it to my brother. My grandmother asked me what was I doing. I told her, I'm doing church. I used to set up church at my house. I take bread, break it, distribute it to all my sinner brothers. There are 3 of them. They needed it. Still do. And then we share a cup of juice. I was just born wired that way. I made them play school. Could be why they hated it so much. There was a time when I didn't appreciate communion, the service of communion, mostly because it made church really too long. And when I was a child, we were not allowed to participate in communion. We weren't welcome at the table until we were confirmed. So what was there to do but sit and watch as little cups and cubes of bread were passed along, passed around, passed over us children? Experiences of being excluded stick in your mind, don't they? Maybe you've had experiences of being excluded, like being the last chosen for a team in gym class. That would be me, unless it was gymnastics. Or not being invited to a birthday party when all your friends are invited. And we know how it feels to be included, to be invited, to be welcomed, whether it's a party, a team, a club, or a table. Jesus gathered his disciples around a table, a Passover table. It wasn't the first table that they had gathered around in their lifetimes, nor in the 3 years that they had been following Jesus. And the Passover meal was rich in ritual and symbolism. Jews gathered the first night of Passover to celebrate and commemorate the Exodus from Egypt with a meal called a Seder. In Jesus' time, they ate unleavened bread to remind them of the bread that the Israelite slaves ate in haste since there was no time to let the dough rise. Recent research suggests that a bean stew, lamb, olives, bitter herbs, a fish sauce, fresh vegetables, unleavened bread, dates, and wine were likely on the table at the Last Supper. However, it is a deep rabbit hole dive when you research whether or not the Last Supper was actually the Passover meal, when exactly it took place, and what was eaten. So let's just all agree that regardless of what night it was held and what was eaten, there was bread and there was wine. The supper's significance, I would argue, is not what was served, not that night, but instead, who is gathered, and what was said, and what was done. Jesus was gathered with his disciples. James and John and Peter were present. Andrew, Thomas, Philip, Matthew, Simon, James the Greater, Jude Thaddeus, Bartholomew, and Judas Iscariot. If you look at the painting by Leonardo da Vinci, not this one, you might think there is a woman present. We all know that picture, do we not? They're all lined up on one side of the table. Really? Can you imagine they're all sitting on one side of the table? But Da Vinci figured, well, I need to get them all in. And so he painted. In his picture, you might think there's a woman present, and people argue that it's Mary Magdalene that joined them at the table. It's actually John, painted in a rather youthful and feminine way. What can we learn from this group of followers whom Jesus called to join him, who have gathered together at this table. We know that they are a greatly diverse group of men, and that is significant. Jesus called, invited, and included men from different places, different backgrounds, different vocations. Judas is the only disciple from Judea. Simon is also called Simon the Zealot. Zealots were a Jewish sect, a violent group bent on revolution and overthrowing the Roman government. Peter and Andrew were brothers from Capernaum, early followers of John the Baptist. They were friends of James and John, fishing with them for their father's business. Peter was married and often traveled with his wife. And John, the disciple who loved Jesus, wrote a large portion of the New Testament, writing more about love than any other writer. Bartholomew came from Cana in Galilee, and Matthew was a tax collector, the most despised occupation in Israel, for they were known to take extra money and put it in their pockets or pay off the Romans. Jesus said, "I did not come to call the righteous, but the sinners." And when he saw Matthew in the tax collector's booth, he said to him, "Follow me." And Matthew did. And doubting Thomas, who questioned often, but when Lazarus died and the disciples were afraid for Jesus' life, Thomas said, "Let us also go that we may die with him." We see the character, quality of courage and loyalty to Christ. This curious and diverse group of people whom Jesus gathered along his way, together they became family. And they sat at table welcoming people, feeding people, healing and teaching and preaching. Sitting at table together that night before Jesus was betrayed, sitting with the one who would betray him, with those who would fall asleep in the garden, with those who would abandon him at the foot of the cross, Jesus acknowledges what will happen and what is to come. This is a well-known scene in the narrative. It holds some of what I believe are the most often spoken words in the Christian tradition. We call them the words of institution. And they're recited every time we take communion, and I'll speak them at this table in just a bit. The words are so well known that sometimes they seem to lose their meaning. But let's imagine that we're sitting in that room, and that we are the disciples. We're having what will be our last supper with our teacher and our friend, although we don't know it. Things have been heated lately, and we're not sure what's coming next. We had a fantastic fanfare when we entered Jerusalem. It was crazy. People were throwing down coats, and Jesus rode a donkey over top of them, and we walked alongside him and behind. But there's trouble brewing, and we know it, and we can feel it. There's tension in the room. Judas is acting weird, and we're not sure what's going on. And Peter is being his usual blustery self, proclaiming that he'll follow Jesus unto death. And Jesus keeps talking about how he's going to suffer and die. It all seems too much to handle. It's unbelievable. Even more confusing, he takes a towel from the servant woman, a bowl of water, and kneels before Peter, and he washes his feet. He, Jesus, like a servant, kneels down on the floor and serves Peter. Peter is outraged. How could Jesus do this? He said, "You call me Lord and teacher, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set an example for you that you should do, and I have done for you. Servants, all of us." And then Jesus and the 12 sat down to have dinner. It's kind of the ultimate television sitcom family dinner. That dysfunctional family gathers for Thanksgiving meal and secrets are revealed. There's fighting amongst the passing of the bread, arguing as another glass of wine is poured. Then Jesus stands up and he takes a loaf of bread and he breaks it in half and he claims that it is his body broken for them. This is my body, broken for you. I'm sure most of them must have been thinking, what the heck is he talking about? Maybe he'd lost it. I mean, bread as his body and broken for them? What does he even mean? Even if they did believe that he was going to suffer and die, which it seems that they still weren't buying, how would it be for them? For the political movement, maybe, but for them? And really, how would his death help anything? If he died, then that's it. He'd be dead, and they'd be left alone, and nothing would change. And where would that leave them after 3 years together, and it's led to this? So what's all this talk about being broken for them? Then Jesus raises his glass and he said that the wine is his blood. It's poured out for them and for many, and is part of the new covenant. More bizarre talk. A covenant they could understand. Covenants were part of their community life. Even blood being poured out makes some sense. Sacrifice of an animal, but not a person. What was it about that dinner that so captivated the disciples that they shared it and repeated it at other tables and other places over the weeks and the months and the years after that evening? Jesus said, "Each time you eat of my body, do so in remembrance of me. Each time you drink of the cup, do so in remembrance of me." I imagine in those first days and weeks and months as they were bereft, as they grieved their life without Jesus, that in the ritual, in the communion, he was brought back to them. They communed with Jesus in those moments and in those words. And in the act of breaking the bread and taking the pieces of it and eating it, they were brought close to Jesus again. When they shared the cup, they felt his love, each time remembering him. He was real to them in a way that he is not to us. They walked and talked and ate and fished and laughed and sang and cried and healed and taught and loved with him. And sitting at that table without him, with that empty spot with their broken hearts, maybe the ritual of the bread and cup healed their own brokenness. And each time it brought him back, and they were able to feel his presence with them once again. That's what this table is for us. That's what our own tables are for us at home. We gather at the table with peanut butter and jelly sandwiches or lamb dinners, and we hold hands and we ask blessings on the food, and we give thanks to God and our Jesus for all that we have and that which we are about to receive. We pass the food and we pour our glasses and we share love around the table. And in those moments, the extraordinary and extravagant love of Jesus is palpable. This is my body broken for you so that you understand that sometimes you have to do hard things that no one else understands in order to be true to yourself. This is my body broken for you so that you know that no matter what color your skin is, no matter where you come from, no matter what language you speak or who you love, I love you. This is my blood shed for you for the forgiveness of sins, so that you, no matter what you do, or when you mess up, or when you judge others, or when you reject your neighbor, or when you close the door, or when you take and you do not give, my blood was shed that you would be forgiven. Hear me. You are forgiven. What really matters is that you can look in the mirror and love the person you see. You see the one made in my image, my beloved. Do so in remembrance of me. May it be so.